Welcome and thanks for joining us here as professionals walking a spiritual path. My name is Brad Miller, a lawyer, and with me is Jason Medford. And what exactly is it that you do?
Well, I do a lot of stuff, but probably professionally, just to make it easy for everybody, right? We'd like to say Brad's a lawyer, I'm a CPA. Now, I have practiced public accounting, but I've never done taxes. Most people think CPAs do taxes, not me. Always done audits and risk management and things like that. So been kind of in the corporate space that way, but it's easier for people to say that. Or I can tell the joke. I don't know if I've told you this joke or not too, because sometimes when people ask me what I do, because there was a lot of times when I was traveling the world all the time and I was in a lot of different spaces, people had asked me, so what do you do? It's like, well, I teach CIA training and I'm part of the NSA. And people would smile, like Brad's smiling right now. And it's like, oh, I'm like, yeah, if I told you what I did, I'd have to kill you, right? Well, no, I wouldn't do that. But then, CIA is actually certified internal auditor. So, and NSA is National Speakers Association. So anyway, that's the funny part. That's the funny one.
Do
Or
you
the
know
other,
do you know 10 ways to kill me with your voice then? Is that how that works?
probably I could actually. I
Probably.
don't know if I could. I wouldn't probably put it to that use, but anyway.
But anyway, so
Anyway, but I'm
um
bump to keep it simple, right?
right,
I mean, it's like
exactly.
we're talking to you as people who have been trained in analytical, logical reasoning, logical careers, corporate, and professional service kind of stuff. And so that's why we thought it would be nice to just share with you kind of how we've come on this path of learning how to start feeling and using our intuition and coming across this spiritual path when we've both been trained and had our careers very analytical. And I think it was interesting, Brad, because we were talking about what do we want this episode to be, right? And so, kind of maybe share what we were talking about just before, because it lines into the topic that we wanted to discuss today, which is something really easy that everybody that's listening can do.
Yeah. So so we were trying to figure out what the topic was, and I've got a list of like 30 different things that we can talk about. Just various things that is kind of associated with the idea of kind of spirituality and spiritual journeys and being a professional. And Jason, you asked, what we would talk about, and I sat there. I'm like, yeah, I don't really know. Nothing's really coming to me, nothing jumping off on this list. And then your question to me was something like, how did you get started down this path? Like, how did your journey start? And I kind of sat there and stopped for a second, and I'm like, well, I guess for me, if I really kind of think about it, when I was in law school, when I started practicing right out of law school as a lawyer, my favorite places after, coming home or whatever were on the weekends were on the couch inside in the air conditioning. And not that I was, so we call it that I was anti outdoors, but I definitely didn't go out very often. Basically for me, outdoors was the area between places I wanted to go. I had to go through the outdoors to get from my house or whatever to someplace else. And that's kind of the way I saw it back then, I suppose. And sometime I think around the birth of my daughter, maybe a little bit before, I started to go for walks. So there was a park that was close by my house. I had to drive 5 minutes down the road to get there, but there was a park and had a path around the outside of it. And so I'd go down there and I'd walk the path a couple times. And so do a couple miles of walking and being outside, being out in nature, It was in a park. It was relatively peaceful in this little neighborhood where the park was located. And I guess that really, I don't know, I would say it flipped a switch for me. But that was when I first started looking back at it in hindsight. That's, I think, when I started noticing changes in me at that point. Um, and kind of from there, things just kind of built on and then snowballed, um,
Snowball from
kind of
there.
from there.
Well,
Yeah.
and so
But
and so you
so
said you started noticing some changes, right? So what kind of changes did you start to notice, right? Because like you said, you graduated, you were in a law firm, and I mean I know I was in public accounting firms, which have a very similar culture to law firms. There's a lot of pressure, you're working a lot of hours. Sometimes you're not treated that well. Hopefully you worked for better firms than I did. But starting to take those walks, what sort of changes did you start to notice in yourself?
so up, up to that point, like I said, it was, my spot where I felt most comfortable was on the couch. We lived in the city in Columbus, Ohio, and we had a nice little house, but it was a very small little lot. We had a backyard with a tree in it, and a fence around it that the dogs would go out and play in. But I didn't really go outside. There really wasn't a nice place to go out and enjoy the weather, or that wasn't even a concept for me, was taking the time to do that. um and then when I started to go for these walks, which I started just as a way to get some exercise, because I realized that I was sitting around a lot, and I don't like to sweat. So walking was a way to move without necessarily sweating, especially if I timed the time of day properly. I could avoid hot parts of the day and things. So I figure walking would be a good way to at least get moving around and things like that. And again, I said, I feel like maybe somewhere out there with my daughter kind of sprung these ideas into my head. Um, but some of it was just the connecting with the peacefulness. Normally I would pop in a podcast episode. I listened to it as I walked. Sometimes I get through 2 episodes, depending on how long or short they were. Just to kind of get different ideas in my head. But just being outside, just moving my body, being away from all the work. I wasn't thinking about this client or this matter that I was working on. It was my time, my own little time that I had, an hour or whatever it was that I was taking. Um, and it started appreciating the trees, the things that I saw around, the grass, the smell of the grass after it had been mowed, the way the light reflected off of, in the morning, if I go out in the morning, the way the light reflected off of the dew on the grass, and I would take my phone and take some pictures of that, and just started, I guess, appreciating nature, the beauty of it, the peacefulness, the sereneness of it. Um, yeah,
Well,
and kind of started there.
I think it's interesting because as you're talking about it, I'm like, I know what was going on. Right? Is that what's funny, and we've talked about connectedness before, right? Is that an interesting thing as humans is we like to worship the hand of our creation. Okay, to say it one way, right? I'm a human and look at this beautiful tall building that I created. Okay. And I will tell you, it's a funny synchronicity, but it's a synchronicity. Okay. I was in Seattle many years ago. I mean, you could go back and look and see when the earthquake happened in Seattle. There's a fairly good sized earthquake that happened in Seattle in the late 90s, early 2000s. I was there. Right. I was working in Seattle. I was downtown. I was on the 45th floor of one of the big buildings downtown. And I remember it was, like I said, there was I don't know why, but we were working in this conference room, and I was looking out over the city, looking out over the bay, beautiful, beautiful, looking, right? And I remember having a thought of something like, wow, these buildings are beautiful. It's, such a feat to build something like that. But nature can destroy it in an instant. And I remember kind of having that thought. And again, it's like this weird thought, right? That you're having. But when I was at that client, and like I said, I don't remember if I had that thought exactly. No, it wouldn't have been at that moment. But I remember having that thought, and we were still at the same client because we were in that conference room. And later, within that week when we were there, the earthquake hit Seattle. And I remember, I live in California, so I'm used to earthquakes, right? But the guy that I was working with, he was like diving under the table. And I'm like, dude, we're in a building that's like less than 10 years old. We're in one of the safest places in the whole city because it's on rockers and it's moving. So I was over at the window watching the building sway, watching all the other buildings, sway in downtown, and just marveling at the power of nature, right? The awe of it, the power behind it, right? And I think, as humans, we go to work in a building, we come home in our building, we go outside, we live in these postage stamp places, we have one tree in the backyard, right? And we kind of get disconnected from nature. But we are nature, right? And so we need some connection to nature. And if we don't have it, we feel stressed out, we're working all the time. It's like it's just not good for us physically, as well as it's not good for us emotionally or spiritually as well, right? And so as you started going for the walk, you started for a reason of exercise. But as you're sitting there talking about, oh, you're feeling more peaceful and you weren't thinking about your clients anymore, and you started appreciating nature and you started smelling the cut grass, I'm like, dude, you didn't even realize it, but those are mindful practices that are connecting you back to nature, right? And so it's no wonder that you were feeling more peaceful, right? Because you were connecting back with and being out in nature, right? And that's why a lot of people now, because the majority of the world lives in urban settings. And so most people are disconnected from kind of wild or raw nature, right? But there's nature all around us at the same point, if we're aware of and placing attention on it.
Yeah. Even in downtown the cities, you've got falcons that are perching, have their nests on the top of the buildings, and there are trees and there are little parks and grass areas, and and I thought, my wife and I, when we kind of were looking at houses, when we bought that house, kind of our thought was, we'll be here for a couple of years, and then we talked about even moving to a place actually like downtown, something like a condo or something like that downtown, where we would be able to walk to places, and down the streets there'd be stuff, but it would be presumably some sort of a condominium building. They're not really in many houses in downtown areas, but that was kind of what we kind of focused on, is the buildings and the stores, the places, the things, that kind of stuff to do, which is completely different than what I do now, where I am now.
Well, yeah, because you guys just got into a new house. You've got a bigger backyard, but it goes like right out into the forest kind of thing.
Yeah, we so decided, as my daughter was getting about ready to start school, that we didn't want to be in the school district in the cities, and we wanted to find someplace else. But that could have been anywhere. That could have been the suburbs, that could have, whatever, but didn't really, appeal to us. We wanted to go someplace down in what's called the Hocking Hills here. So it's forest area. It's a big kind of a tourist area. People like to get away. Like we kind of alluded to, we've got our property is like 5.5 acres. It's 5 acres of it is wooded, trees, ravine. Like I look out my window at my office here and I've just got trees. I'm 10 minutes away from several different nature preserves I go hiking in. And maybe someday we'll talk a little bit about some of those experiences I've had going on some of those walks and things. But yeah, we're, almost an hour away outside the city now. Completely opposite of what we thought we would be before. And I don't think this would have happened had it not been for starting to take those walks. I think that started the process. Even though it's more of a hindsight now, I see it like, well, I guess that was step one, was taking the walks outside, and then we started to go to a farther, bigger parks that were outside. We go, some longer walks, and then we started to go out to hike places, and now we live here where we can hike in our backyard just about.
But I think it's, I get a lot from going out into nature, as well. And again, I love going for hikes and backpacking and doing other things like that as well. And if you can, great, right? If you live on 5 acres of forested land, wonderful, right? Go out and hug a tree and run around barefoot in the dirt, right? Because it's all good for you to do that, right? But for those of you that are listening to and are thinking, man, but I live in that condominium or I live in a high rise someplace, I don't have nature right around me. Well, let me shock you, but you do have nature all around you if you're aware of it. And so I'm going to give you a little thing of what I do, right? So even again, I'm in an office, right? But I've got a little plant, and this little plant on my desk, for those of you that are watching the video, you can see it. It's a nice little one. I got another one back up there. They don't require a lot of water, but that is living nature, right, in the palm of my hand, right? Now, even if you don't have a little plant like that, right? But again, plants are a great symbiotic understanding too of the collectiveness of everything. It's emitting oxygen that I need to live. I am emitting carbon dioxide, which it needs to live, right? So the plant and I are connected, and just realizing and being grateful for that plant, for that tree, for that whatever, helps you start to become connected back to nature. Now, even if you don't have a plant around you, right, look around you, right? And so again, I have some little crystals over here, and I'll just pull one out. This crystal is labradorite. Maybe we'll talk about that later. It's a special stone for me, but that is nature in my office. That was once in the earth. It is nature with me in my office, right? My hat that I'm wearing is made of wool from Ireland. Love this hat, right? So again, I have nature on my head. I can think about and connect and share gratitude with those sheep who went around eating, munching, growing their wool, and grateful for them for letting themselves be sheared, for all the people that took that wool and that ended up making the fabric, sewed the hat, shipped it to me from Ireland to the United States, right? So nature is on my head, and I can feel connected, and I can feel grateful for nature, even if I'm not running around in the forest, right? And what I just explained to you, there's 3 different examples, right? Anybody who's listening can connect with nature if you place your attention on it, and you kind of go through a very simple 30-second exercise of what I just shared with you.
Yeah, and those are great examples of inside your space. But I'm almost guarantee you that if you really look outside your space, your immediate space, you
Even
can still
better.
find some nature too. Like,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
even at that house, we had a tree in the backyard. So there was a grass in our backyard. There was a large tree in there, which provided nice shade and things. I had yards I could go out and, in the front yard, I could mow and things. So there was flower beds and things. So there was still nature there. Or I could drive, 5 minutes down the street and I could get to a park. There was nature there. And so even if you live downtown in a condominium, there's probably places maybe within walking distance that you could go that's out in nature that you could walk, that's got trees, a park areas. Maybe you need to drive a little bit further out to get outside of the urban core, depending on where you are. But, some place you can get out in nature. Like, it's almost, it's an excuse, I guess, to say that there's no nature around you or that you can't find nature. You can, you just got to look at it and be willing to take the time again, maybe to drive out, to find it a little bit.
Yep. Well, and I think anything you can do, right? I mean, again, like we talked about with push-ups. Hey, if you only have time and remember to do one push-up, doing one push-up is better than doing no push-ups, right? So, again, yeah, if you can get in the car, you can drive down to the park, you can go for a 3-mile hike, you have time to do that, great. And that will benefit you more, just like doing 20 push-ups will benefit you more than one push-up. But at least doing one push-up is something. And even if all you do is spend 20 or 30 seconds in a day, feeling that connection or feeling gratitude for nature or what nature has provided for you, right? Because again, without nature, I would be sitting here naked, right? Because all the clothing that
We
I
would not be
have
doing a
on,
video podcast.
we wouldn't be doing the
that
video
was the case.
podcasts unless we were a porn company, right? But
that's a different episode, Jason.
different
That's
episode.
a different episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
But right, so when you think about it, really, pretty much everything around you, the desk that I have here, my computer, the cards on my computer, the candle that I have over here, some of the statues, my microphone, the books, everything that we have comes from nature. And so even just feeling gratitude and connected for the fact that nature has helped to provide all of these abundant things around you, even just 30 seconds a day is going to make you feel more connected, feel more peaceful, feel more grateful. And that's going to help you connect back, right, with everything.
Yep. It's as simple as that. I mean,
so there's one simple little tip that you can do. And again, it's like, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what religious beliefs or anything else that you might have. And don't believe us, but just try it. Try it for this week, right? Try connecting, try going on a walk, try doing whatever, but each day spend at least 30 seconds a day trying to connect with nature in one of the ways that we've been talking about, and see how you feel at the end of the week. It works for me. It works for Brad. I'm guessing it'll work for you, but hey, if it doesn't, that's okay too. Right? But you're never going to know unless you try it. So why not? It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to cost you any money to do it. So why not just try it and see how you feel?
So your homework for today is to go out and enjoy nature in some capacity.
Not that we're telling you what to do, but we're suggesting, right?
Right. No, yeah. But yeah, like I said, for me, that's in hindsight, I think is kind of my gateway to this whole idea of spirituality. And so I appreciate the power it can have. And I know that I'm only touching the very tip of the iceberg, that there's so much more under the water that I don't have any awareness of at this point yet. So yeah.
I'm the same way, and that's why it's a journey.
That's right. That is true. Well, Again, with that, I think that's a good place here. Again, something to think about, something to people to do, put on their little homework list. We're walking a spiritual path. Literally, we're walking in the woods this week, or your park, or even just down the street. Just being outside and enjoying that. You don't have to get all hippie barefoot and hug trees and things like that. It can be just as simple as a quick walk around the park, or a plant on your desk. Be simple as that. All right. Well, if people want to find more about our connections with nature, Jason, how do they get a hold of you and find out more about things?
Well, the best way to reach me is jasonmefford.com, or reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I'm easy to find both places. And how about you, Brad? How's the best place for people to reach you?
The best place is probably through my website, newmodernlawyer.com. I also post frequently on LinkedIn, so you can also find me there, generally talking about things like how to be a good lawyer dad. So if you're interested in that, check me out.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. And like I said, we gave you homework, but you can do it or not do it. It's up to you. But excited to have you back on our next episode. So have a great week. We'll see you.
Hug a tree.